All right, after long last, I am going to start. So, when we went over last time, when we started to go over Chapter 4, I mentioned that I didn't think the book does Recyclerviews justice because we're going to be using Recyclerviews a lot in the programs we do from now on. And you may or may not use a Recyclerview, for example, for your final project. All right, this is great because it keeps the wordage on there so you get to see me talk. So, all right. But what I want to do is I want to go over this. I prepared this yesterday. I grabbed this. I gleaned it or stole it all off the internet. All right. So let's just talk about before there was a Recyclerview, there was a list view. All right, there still is a list view. The list view is considered a legacy component, which means that it's out there, it's still basically supported, but with all that said, it's recommended that you don't use it because Recyclerview allows you to do things that a list view doesn't allow you to do. So as it says in there, with a list view, there was a lag in scrolling. When your list got really long, it could take a long time to have to refresh the screen. There was no default animation support, so you didn't get the flick look basically as you were moving it around. Plus, you could only scroll in a vertical direction. So in other words, you couldn't do the equivalent of a carousel. All right, so you couldn't scroll horizontally. All right. So it says here, why even use a Recyclerview? Well, you may or may not realize this, but with a list view, what it constantly does as it grabs every component is it's recalling find view by ID. And you might think, well, nothing wrong with that, except that that's an unbelievably slow operation. All right, and it can really, that's, again, when they talked about there being a lag, that was one of the major problems and one of the major reasons there was a lag. All right. So, there's a lot of stuff that Recyclerviews allow you to do. Notice what it says. It uses layout managers. We're going to be doing this today. We're going to build a project in just a couple minutes. And then we're going to start on another one, which unfortunately I didn't have time to finish yesterday. So we'll do part of it today, and then we'll see if we can finish it up tomorrow. Okay? Then I want to talk to you about what we're going to be doing next. All right. So as it says, a Recyclerview uses layout managers. You know what a layout manager is, whether you think you do or not. All right, basically every single program we've created thus far has had a layout manager where when we go into our XML file, it's been set to constraint layout. But there are other layout managers as well. In fact, one of the ones that, in my humble opinion, is used a lot with Recyclerviews is a linear layout manager, where you just basically put things, just left to right, top to bottom type of way. So we're going to look at that. Another thing, so I said before that when we had just the list view that you couldn't scroll horizontally, all right, it was actually not that much you could do with a list view. But now with the Recyclerview, as it says there, it supports grids, it supports staggered lists, and I've got staggered list and customized list, and really a staggered list is a customized list. So in other words, you can put things out on the screen in virtually any order you want. All right, you can throw stuff all over the place, for lack of better words. All right. It also provides, as it says here, default animations. Plus, you can customize them. You get a default animator. All right. But if you want, you can go in and you can customize those. That's going to become important when we start talking about your test. All right, which I'm not talking about at all right now, so don't worry about it. We'll hopefully talk about it by Friday. All right, this is basically what the Android documentation says. I'm not going to read it to you. All right, but it allows you to work with anything in a scrollable list type of format. All right, bottom line, that's the big thing. All right, so as it says here, here's some of the key words. Really, the heart and soul of this is the adapter. Now, you've worked with adapters before. You're going to work with them again in here. In fact, you'll be working with them throughout most of the rest of the semester. And if you didn't like them, when we worked on it for the drop down or the spinner, you're going to like these less. because it's more work that you have to do. All right, there's a lot of work that you have to do to get Recyclerviews to work. The good news is, all right, we'll go through an example today. If you did do the assignment that I gave you, which was that Code Lab 4, if you finished all of Code Lab 4, Code Lab 4.5 actually walked you through a Recyclerview. We're going to look at that again today, all right? But as it says there, it has the responsibility of binding data sets to views that will be displayed in the window. Let's just break that down. A data set is any data that you want to be able to scroll through and take a look at. I mean, that can come from the internet. When we do our next programs here, okay, I've already sent you part of the thing that we're going to use for the next one, but we're just going to basically create a simple array list with, that's going to have the U.S. presidents in it. We're going to work with that. All right. But the point is, it says it must bind the data sets to views. So in other words, it's the communication mechanism that allows your data to talk to your program and be shown in a scrollable type of way. All right? All right. As it says, the adapter is a subclass of Recyclerview.adapter. And as mentioned there, this provides a binding from the app's data set, okay? So as it says, rather than constantly having to refresh itself and create new views, imagine that you had a list of contacts where you had 1,000 contacts, and you could see 10 on the screen at once. It's the difference between having to make 1,000 views, literally, and then or making about 15, all right? Where you'd show 10 on the screen at a time, you'd have 2 or 3 in reserve, and as you flicked up, the last 2 or 3 that went off the screen will show, okay? But you're constantly refreshing that screen. It works a lot better. All right, the Layout Manager, it sounds kind of weird, and it is kind of weird with the Layout Manager. And you may have gone through this, you may not have, but I want to show you something when we look at the actual example that we're going to create as a class in just a little bit. All right, but basically what the Layout Manager is going to do is it's going to show, the one that we're going to create on our own here, is it's going to show what one row basically in the Recyclerview would look like. All right, and when I say what it would look like, what components are on there? Are there image views? Are there text views? Or what is in there? Okay? All right. As it says, there's 3 types of layout managers. The linear, vertical, or horizontal. You just basically specify what you want. The grid, if you want to work with more of a columnar type of layout. And staggered, which is basically, again, the way that you do the customized ones. Already mentioned the animator. And as I look in here, no, whoops. It doesn't come with an e-fault, it comes with a default animations, okay? Then when it starts to get a little bit hinky, for lack of better words, is when we start to get into talking about view holders. Notice it is mandatory to use a view holder. So let me get back to there. It is mandatory to use a view holder with a Recyclerview. It helps draw the UI for an individual Recyclerview item on the screen. All right. All right. Some of these articles that I went and grabbed this stuff from, I will just tell you that I don't think that the person who wrote it, that English was their first language. That they're really good articles. All right. And what I'll do is I'll try to come up with a listing of them, and I'll just send you the URLs. All right. Now you have to start to understand the difference between the position and the index. All right. The position, as it says, it's where something is located within basically an adapter. Whereas the index is where it is in the data set, for lack of better words. All right. And as it says, their binding is preparing a child view to display. There's a lot of stuff in here. We're going to talk about a little of it. All right. But when you start looking at it, they talk about dirty views and a bunch of other stuff. And it's do you need to know all that stuff? No. But you need to know how to set one of these things up, and you need to know when something breaks, kind of what to look for. All right? So we are going to start by going and looking at the example that was in 4.5. But then we're going to build our own because we're going to build it just a little bit differently. All right. So as it says, a recycle view is, again, a view used to display data at a specific position. All right. And as mentioned there, what happens basically is as you start to flick your way up, all right, the stuff that disappears from your screen goes into what's called a scrap view. And what that means is it's a temporary place in cache that it says, hey, we're not using this right now. But when you start to flick back the other way, you can bring them back into focus. All right. And then you've got a dirty view, and it says a child view that must be rebound by the adapter before it's displayed. So this is what it looks like, and this is the best picture I could find, but that said, it's not a big picture. So again, you've got this stuff so you can take a look at it. And you see that right here at the bottom is the data model. All right, and the data model represents a single item in a recycler view. All right. And then you've got an adapter above that. And the adapter, as it says, it'll say on the next slide, is going to try to examine all the single items and make an appearance out of it using the view holder. All right. A recycler view, as it says, is going to use the view holder to display each and every row inside of it. That's why you need it. Not only that, when you use this view holder, there are 3 different methods that you must go and you must bring into your program. All right, they're mandatory. All right, as it says, the layout manager customizes how the items are placed. If you didn't go through the example that I asked you to go through in lesson 4, you may not know what that means. Otherwise, you probably do. All right, so kind of this is what happens here. And again, I realize it's not that big, but it says, imagine that you've got like maybe 4 or 5 rows. It's a small recycler view that you're only showing 4 or 5 rows at a time. All right. So as it says, to display a row, you create a layout XML file and you inflate it in code. All right. The inflation, as it says, for every row is expensive. What that means is it's time consuming. All right. It's resource intensive is what they're saying. Finding items from a row like a text view, image view, etc. by using Find View by ID, again, is also expensive. So we need a way to kind of preload everything, and that's what you're looking at doing with this. All right? All right. And I mean, there were a lot of examples that I found, and what, one of the ones that they used was they basically, when they went through everything, they tried to use a restaurant. And they said, imagine that you got a very small restaurant that only seats 3 people, all right, and you really only have 3 plates, okay, and so what happens is, well, somebody finishes their meal. They haven't left yet, but they finished their meal, so they give you their plate and you wash it and you get it ready so you have it available for the next person. All right, so as it says, this is the point where the recycler view is actually going to generate previously cached objects as it's moving around. All right. The idea is not to create a view holder object every time. You want to create one and reuse it because, again, otherwise it can be resource intensive. All right. And that was it. All right. So there's not really a whole heck of a lot in there. So, all right. So what I want to do, and just so you know this, all right, and Nicholas, like I said, got a hold of me this morning, but I do want you to do this. We're going to do this as a class. But if you have a problem or you fall behind, I just want you to know, I guess 2 things. First of all, if you go out to my GitHub, I've got 2 things that I've added in the last 2 days. All right, so let's see. And the first one we're going to look at is this Recyclerview PDF, and that's the one from our textbook. So we're going to look at that one. So that's out there. The other one we're going to look at, we're going to create this together, and it's called Recyclerview Example 01. All right, so we're going to do both of those. So I'm just going to grab this one, and I think I've already got it, in fact, so let me just grab it up here. So Recyclerview, there it is. Cell file. All right. Now, I'm still having some problems with my code, and part of the problem that I'm having is if for whatever reason the system is not letting me update my Gradle. And if you ever have that problem, so I go to here to File, and I go down to Project Structure. Now it is, at least for this project, it is up to date, but usually this says 6 something. All right, since that says 6 something, and the one up above it is 7 something, it fails when it tries to do the build every time I do that. I can't do a rebuild, I can't do anything. So I have to go back in, like I said, to File, Project Structure, and this is the one I got to change. So I go down here and I look for the one that just says 7.3. All right. Okay. So again, this is more for those of you who didn't do this assignment. Maybe you all did. I don't know. All right. As you can tell, I've fallen way behind on my grading. Not going to get into it. This week hasn't gone the way I was hoping it would go. How's that? I'll just leave it like that. All right, so this is the one. I don't know why I'm getting that, but I'll wait. There we go. So this is the one, and again, you can work your way through this. Okay, so we're going to take a look at this. You'll notice if I want to add new ones here, it's up to like, I don't know what it is, 19 or 20. But every time I click the button, it adds another one. You can see the little plus sign that it added to it. And every time I click on one, it says that it was clicked. Okay? All right. Now, I do want to mention something, and that is, evidently your instructor doesn't know how to read. All right. And what I mean is, I was supposed to build this one not as an empty project, but I did. And I'd already put in most of the code. So I manually added the fab. So mine is going to look different than the one that the authors came up with, and I had to make some changes in mine. All right. Now, if you have not done this yet, and again, I don't want to embarrass anybody, so I'm not asking, but if you have not done this yet, as you go through lesson 4 or 5, right near the end, they give you the finished code. All right. So I guess at the worst case, you could copy that in. So let's take a look at it. And I'm going to start by going into main activity. All right. So virtually always when you create a Recyclerview app, you're going to create a Recyclerview and an adapter. And again, I used their names. I literally followed their instructions, which in my humble opinion sucked. All right, there were a few things that were in there that you had to make some changes to or whatever to actually get them to work. In fact, one time, not going to lie, I went and looked at the answer key because following their instructions, I couldn't get it to work. So you'll notice that, for example, here, and this is the way some people code, that their variable names all start with M. All right, and it means it's basically it's a modular variable. It's something that is going to be used throughout the program, and that it just what some people do. They just start it with M. So that's what they did. So that's what I did. Again, I manually added the floating action button. That's why if you look at the one that's in the that's actually the solution, it's not going to look like this. I already mentioned that. All right, so again, up here, so get used to doing this, in other words. Get used to setting up a Recyclerview and an adapter and doing that right underneath. So these are class level variables. All right. That link list of strings, that's just the thing that says word 1, word 2, etc. All the other goodies in there. All right. Then in here, we basically get our handles. Nothing new there. I mean, I don't think that should be a surprise to anyone. Okay? And this is the on-click listener for that fab button. All right? And what does it do? Well, it adds a new word. Okay? And to show that it's a new word, we have the plus sign there. Either they had that or else I accidentally put that in. I don't remember, and it's really not that important. Okay? Now, there's a few things in here, like it says here, scroll to the bottom, smooth scroll to position, etc. the only way that some of this stuff is going to make sense is if you go out and you look here. Where? Well, if you go out to developer.android.com and you key in right here, Recyclerview. All right. Now, good, bad, or indifferent, I think when software is always changing, not only is software always changing, but documentation is always changing as well. All right. When I taught this last year, they had much better, I think, documentation than what they have out there right now. They've taken some of the stuff that was in there out. All right. I wish they wouldn't have, but they did. So as we go through this, or if you haven't, if you're still working on this one and you haven't done anything with Recyclerviews yet, this is a decent place to start. All right. I'm not going to read anything because a lot of it we've already gone through as far as what it is, etc. But starting here, steps for implementing the Recyclerview, planning your layout, again, which kind of manager you're going to use, implementing your adapter and your view holder. So these are the three methods that we're going to have to use in our program. On create view holder, on bind view holder, and get item count. The easiest one is get item count. Because typically, whatever you're working with, you're just going to return the size of that, whatever that happens to be. All right. Then notice on create view holder, it says Recyclerview calls this method whenever it needs to create a new view holder. All right. You can read the rest yourselves. And on the bind, it says it calls this method to associate a view holder with data. So again, the whole thing, it's a conglomeration to work together so that your data is able to be understood by your program, and it's able to be understood by the Recyclerview itself to be able to scroll, for lack of better words. All right. So in here, so if you start going through this and you get really confused, what the heck am I even supposed to be doing in here, etc., okay, then let's just take a look. So we're up at the top here. It's got private class, custom adapter, extends Recyclerview.adapter, custom adapter.viewholder. Wow, that's a mouthful. Well, the point is, if you just put in this right here, public class, you're going to have a problem. All right? It's an adapter, so it has to extend an existing adapter. If you just put in that, you're going to have a problem. All right? Because what it's looking for in there is the type of view holder that you're using. And you'll notice the name here, .viewholder, this name right there must be exactly the same as this name here, including caseness. Everything has to be the same. This is the data that you're going to attempt to be working with. And you can do this, again, in a lot of different ways. All right. So it says provide a reference to the type of views that you are going to be using. Well, this is assuming that this is pretty simple. All we have in here is a text view. All right. So we've got this view holder class that's in here. So this is the first time you've seen this, whether you realize it or not. Look, we've got a public class here called custom adapter, and inside of it we've got another public class that's called view holder. That's called an inner class. Sometimes they're referred to as nested classes. Java is one of the few languages that I know of that allow you to do this. Now, are there more? There's plenty of them, but I'm talking about the ones that I know that allow you to do that. All right? We're going to do ours a little bit differently when we go through our own example in a couple minutes, just because sometimes people find this confusing to have a class within a class. So when we go through our example, we're going to pull the equivalent of this class out and put it in its own class. You can do it either way. Most of the time, you're going to see it done the way that they're showing right here, just so you know that. All right. So then we come through here. Initialize the data set of the adapter. All right. So again, that's just making whatever our data set is available. And there's different ways that you can do this because there's different types of data sets. All right. So we've got our public view holder, and again, as you can see in here, all three of them, all three of the mandatory methods are shown in here. The onCreate view holder, the onBind view holder, all right, and the getItemCount. The easiest, again, is the last one. And usually it's whatever it is you're looking at, .length or .size or .count or something where it's able to literally get a count. All right. Then going back up to the top, as it says there, in the onCreate view holder, create a new view which defines the user interface of the list item. So this is what this is doing in here, is this is inflating that layout. So it's grabbing that file, that XML file that we're going to use, and it's inflating it. So in other words, it's saying that, hey, every time we have one of these views in here, it's going to look like this. All right, when I say it's going to look like this, it's going to have this format, is what I mean. All right. Then we've got the onBind view holder, and as it says, replace the contents of a view. So as you work your way through there, and as they mention here, get element from your data set at this position and replace the contents of the view with that element. All right. Again, that's giving you the scrolling capability. All right. I don't know if that helps, hurts, or what. All right. So this is, again, what happens when you click the Fab button. Basically, it's allowing us to add a new list item. That's it. All right. And notice that once we add a new item to our list, we have to inform the Recyclerview that it's in there. All right. And that's the notify item inserted. As you'd probably guess, there's also a notify item deleted, and I believe there's a notify item modified. All right. Then here it says, create an adapter and supply the data to the word list. So that's what this is. All right. This, as you'd probably guess, most of these things that are in here, word list adapter, and looking up at the top here, mRecycler adapter, etc. These are names we come up with. All right. Some of the stuff when we're calling methods, of course, those aren't names we come up with. All right. So as it says, create the adapter and supply the data to it that you're going to display. Connect the adapter with the Recyclerview. That's the set adapter right here. And then as it says, give the Recyclerview a default layout manager. All right. And I mean, this was all the code. Now, I put a little thing in here. It's not a big thing, but I just said, hey, if the number that, where you've got the word word followed by a number, if it's less than 10, add a 0 to it. And the reason that I did that is I wanted people to understand this, that when you are converting from an integer to a string, this is one way that you can do it. This is a way that's often done. It's string.value of. All right. The toString can be kind of hinky in this language, and actually toString has really got another meaning, and you're going to see that as we go through our next project or two. All right. So that's the main activity. Then in our word list adapter, and again, I'm just trying to go over some terminology and some stuff like that with you right now. So again, this is our data source. This is the inflator that we're going to do. All right. And then we come through here, and as it says, this extends Recyclerview.viewHolder. All right. This is the implements on click listener. This is one of the things they had you add in that assignment. If you don't put that in there, then when you click on an item, you won't get a message that says basically, that it was clicked. And so that right there, that implements view.onClickListener runs this code right here. All right. It says that it was clicked. And since we're changing the code, notice notify the adapter that the data has changed so it can update the Recyclerview to display the data. So instead of saying like word 06, it says word 06 clicked. All right. All right. When we take a look in here, let me move this over a bit. What you'll notice is if I go to layouts, we've got two layouts. We've got our activity main, And there's not much in there. All right? I mean, there's what? There's the Recyclerview, and I didn't want it to go down to the bottom because I wanted room for the floating action button. Again, that I foolishly didn't have in there manually. Or I had to put in there manually, I should say. But then we've got this one. This is word list item. All right, and if we look at that in design view, not much in there. All right. Now, I do want to show you something because for whatever reason, I don't think that a lot of books or whatever go through this, but I'm going to come over here. I want to show you something. If you look up on the screen here, I'm going to click here in my search, and I'm going to type in, there we go, horizontal divider, and I'm going to put that right here. Okay? And then I'm going to click on this. Okay, I don't think it put it in there. I don't know why, but I don't think it did. Try it again. Well, I guess it is. Maybe it is in there. Well, we've done it on the other one, but that's supposed to put a little dash in between each one. You know, it's the equivalent of, like when you see this, in between these two things here, in between these two. Okay? All right. So, that was quick, and maybe you think it wasn't much help, and if you do, sorry about that. So I've got some notes here, and what we're going to do is we're going to start. We'll go till about 1, then we'll take a break. All right? And we're going to go through this, and after we get done, we're going to start on yet another project. All right? Okay, so what I'd like you to do is, in your Visual Studio, start up a new project. So I'm going to close my current one. So start up a new project. Let's just, you know, it's an empty activity. There's no floating action button or anything in it. So let's just call this Recyclerview app. And also just get used to when you type in the word Recyclerview, because it's two words that are strung together. The R and the V are typically, unless you're creating your own variable, they're typically both in uppercase. Okay? Now you can put a blank space in here if you want. It really and truly doesn't matter. All right? So click Finish. And we're going to come at this one a little bit differently. And what I mean by that is, let's wait until the project finishes building here. So you can see I already got that error message about Gradle, because it always goes back again. Now when I go back to project structure, you can see it's back to 7.02. And I've tried to update it 4 or 5 times, and it says it's updated, but then it's not updated. I've never had such a big pain in the butt with working with this. So now it'll come through here. This is what? 7.3-zip does not exist. So when I get that message, all right, which happens once in a while, then I have to close this. This is why this is such a pain in the behind. So I have to exit, and I have to go and open up Android Studio, but I have to open up Android Studio as an administrator, because then it actually takes the change that I put in. Like I said, I've never had to go through this kind of stuff before, ever. So now it's doing a Gradle build, so I believe it's going to be updating it now. And it's funny because even though I'm the only one that uses this machine, it doesn't consider me an administrator when I'm running it. And I've tried to do stuff to make sure it always starts up as an administrator. It doesn't hold. All right. So, far as I can tell, everything's in there. So we're going to, like I said, we're going to do this a little differently. What I'd like you to do, hopefully yours is open now as well. I'd like you to go over to and open up your res folder. So I want you to be able to see your drawable. Okay? All right. Once you've got that, minimize your screen. And then from the email that I gave you today, one of the things that was in that email, literally, again, that's called 2/9/2022. was a folder called Images. If you double click on that folder to open it, it's not perfect. I had to skew the CSS3 and the Node and the React ones to make them all the same size. I wanted everything to be 225 by 225. So highlight all of these. I'm just going to do a Control A, Control C to copy them. Then go back to your or Android Studio and right mouse click on the drawable folder and choose Paste. You want to make sure that you use the first one. Don't use the V24. Use the first one that's in there. Click OK. And it'll come back and say, do you want to put it in that directory? Yes, we do. So you say OK. You can tell real fast whether or not they worked, because when you open up the drawable, you should see all of these in there. All right? All right. Questions on that? Anybody have any problem with that? All right. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're in activity main anyway. So before we build anything else, let's just come in here, all right, and do some work. So right up on the top here, under our main activity, looking, I don't think there was anything special that we had to create up here. Okay, good. So I'm going to come down here, and under the On Create, under my Set Content View, I'm going to start putting in some stuff. So this is the stuff we're putting in, okay? All right. Don't worry, we're getting a bunch of errors in here. Don't worry about it. They're all going to be fixed. All right. So what it's looking for is it's looking for an array list of type data. We don't have that yet. So we're going to get it right now by making it ourselves. All right. And it's probably about 15 lines of typing, but I'll show you the fast way to do it. Okay, so come down to here and go out of your On Create and put in public list data. Again, that's what's being returned, and it's called fill with data. And don't type fill with date. It's data, not date. Moron. All right. It's interesting. This has never happened before. I probably shouldn't say it because I am taping. But the other day, I was taping in the morning class, and nobody was asking questions. It was a lab day, and I was working on a problem for you guys, and it was like, boom, and all of a sudden, my machine just quit on me. And I let out an F-bomb, and I was taping. So I had to make sure that that tape never made and saw the light of day. So, all right, so we're going to come in here, and I'm going to say here, list data equals new array list. All right, so that's what we're creating right now. And again, you may or you may not remember these. You got to spell new right. I know that's a pretty hard thing to do, but and list. All right, so all these errors are going to go away in a minute. I got to give that a name, and we called it little data. There we go. All right. So what we're doing is we're going to create an array list, all right, and that array list is going to be of type data. So what is type data? We're going to do that right now by adding all of the ingredients, so to speak, to that array list, all right? And what we're going to do is we're going to come in here and we're going to add in here, we're going to add those 15 or 16 images that we just copied in, okay? And the way we do that is as follows. We say data.add new data. The first one is called Android, all right? And it's r.drawable dot, sure enough, there's an Android, all right? So you'll notice once I put that in, okay, and don't worry, we'll get rid of all these errors in just a bit, all right? But that's the first one. Now, I would suggest, and you do it whatever way you want, but like I said, there's about 15 of these, something like that. That's what I did, all right? So I'm going to come in here, and the next one is Bootstrap. And I'm just going to give them to you. C# and then CSS3. Up a little bit. There we go. Oops, I cannot have that in there, so that was why I got that error. This has got to be all lowercase. We're going to talk about why in just a minute. And I need one more, I guess. And React. All right. So first of all, I'm getting this error. Let's see. If we click on data up here, and I do a, let's see, an Alt-Enter. It says, what do I want? Data and context. Data. I don't want any of those. So I'm going to go to array list that's right here. Okay, that one. And I'm going to do my Alt-Enter, and it'll bring in the appropriate class. Now, what doesn't it like here? I don't remember. So, Alt-Enter. There. Go up to here if you would. Did you notice this? Look on the screen, please. That I can either just take my mouse and put it over here and click Import Class, or I can take my mouse, put it here and do an Alt-Enter, or usually if I've got an error and I move my mouse over, it's not showing it now, but oftentimes it'll show the red light bulb. So you can do any of those. But I'm going to go here, I'm going to do an Alt-Enter, and say import the class. Context, data, context, contact. Data in raw context. I don't remember having to do that, period. So let me look in here. We're going to do this. We're going to manually put a few things in here. I don't like doing it that way, but we're going to do it like this anyway. So I want you to come up to your top here and type in import Android x.recyclerview .widget oops, not two dots .linear layout manager. It doesn't like there. Linear layout manager. Okay, it's going to get fixed. It's the order in which I'm doing this stuff. So import Android x.recyclerview geez, you have to learn to spell though. .recyclerview dot widget dot Recyclerview. The reason I'm getting an error on this line right here, I forgot the dot widget here. Sorry. And that should get rid of that. There we go. All right. I've got the array list. Import java.util.list. All right. You'll notice that much of this stuff up here is gray because we haven't declared the variables that are going to use it yet. We're going to do that. All right, then we're going to take a break because it's darn hot in here. All right. So, does everybody have this? If you're still typing, that's fine. I'll give you a minute or two to catch back up. Then come down underneath where it says list data, data equal fill with data right here. Hit enter a couple times and let's put in the stuff that's going to actually use what we just typed in. So Recyclerview. Usually, if you only have one, you call it the same name as the control, but you make it lowercase. You don't have to do that. We could call it anything, but it should have something with Recyclerview in it. So I'm just going to type that in like this. Well, here's the problem. We didn't make our Recyclerview yet. So I'm writing code that's referring to things that do not exist yet. All right? And we can call this whatever we want. I just called mine RV programming. And again, you're going to get that error. Don't worry about it. It'll all work its way out. And I even covered my behind, because if for some reason we get done and it doesn't, I've got a working copy out there that you can all get a hold of. All right? So this is going to be our Recyclerview. We're going to create that after the break. And we're going to call it RV programming. So we're going to do that next. All right. Then we'll have Recyclerview underscore adapter. All right. Well, I knew I should have done the other one first, but that's okay. Don't worry, there's only 2 more lines and we're taking our 3 more lines. We're taking our break. Okay, 2 more. All right. And then finally, just so you know, because I forgot to, please go down to the bottom of this thing that says public list data, because we didn't return anything. So just want to come down to the bottom and say return data. All right. And then, so that goes on the bottom of that. Just add your return data line. Okay. And then this. And like I said, we're going to, right after the break, we're going to go in and we're going to write the XML file. All right, it's not going to be much, but we're going to customize it a little bit. Then we'll write our custom XML file. All right, then we'll go in and add the rest of the code.
Your mouse is blocking.
Thank you. And that get application, it's right here. The reason I'm getting that as an error is that's a call to a method. Let's see. Alt. No. All right, and you'll see here it says it's giving us this error because it says we don't have a class that's called Recyclerview Adapter. That's one of the things we're going to build. Now, if I choose this, it'll create a brand new class for me. It won't have anything in it, but you can do that as opposed to coming up here and a right mouse clicking on here and choosing new Java class. They both work. All right, so it's more or less whatever one you're comfortable with. Just make sure. I always use it this way because I want it to make sure that I'm putting it exactly where I want it to go. All right. Okay, so again, we'll fix this in just a little bit. Let's take a break. It is 1:02, so let's please come back at 1:15. All right, it's a little bit early, but I'm going to start back up. You know, I went over this thing with you a little bit, this create dynamic lists with Recyclerview, and if you didn't notice it, if we get down to the very bottom, they do have sample apps. All right, I have not looked at those, but I have no reason to think that they'll work. There's one in Kotlin and there's one in Java. I don't know what the Sunflower one is in. All right, but again, if you're looking for something as we start on this, it just doesn't make any sense. It's a place that you could start at, I guess. So with that said, let's go into our activity main file right here, okay? And we're just going to make some changes to it. All right. First thing we're going to do, because we haven't done anything kind of really like this before, is I want you to go over to code mode here, and we don't want to use... this is just me, the way I do things, and if it's strange, it's strange. But this line right here, I never understand why that line is not on a new line. But it's not, so fine. So I'm going to change this, and I'm just going to come in here, and I'm just going to change the layout type manually. So I'm going to come in here and type in relative layout. And what you should notice is after we do that, well, usually what happens when you do that is it changes it down here automatically, but it didn't, and that's okay, so I'll manually change it down here. All right. So that's the first thing that I wanted us to do. Let's go and change everything that's in here. Let's change it right from here. All right, so let's see. That Android is fine, the Res Auto. The tools you don't always need in there, but it's fine to just leave it in there. But the next thing is, we don't want this. This is that text view that's centered on the screen. We don't even want that in there. So I'm just going to remove it. All right. And we're going to come in here and ourselves, we're going to add a Recyclerview. Now, you can just start typing in Recyclerview, or if you want, you can go back into design mode, and you can find, because Recyclerview is right here, you can drag it in. Okay? And when you do that, usually it doesn't put it in like that. It usually puts it in just fine, but it didn't like that, so I'm going to put it there and drop. There we go. All right. So that added the Recyclerview. Okay. And one of the things I wanted to show you, because I'm not sure if it's actually changed manually in here or not, but if you don't have to open this up, but if you just look up on the screen here for a moment, I'm going to go to Gradle scripts, and I'm going to go to this build.gradle right there. All right, and I'm going to see if this is in here. All right, it used to be, it isn't anymore, but when you came in here and you had these dependencies, and it would also say like implementation and etc. But it used to be you had to manually come in when you came in to actually put in a Recyclerview. So it would push you off to this file that's right here, and it would say, hey, do you really want to do this, for lack of better words? All right, you don't have to anymore, which I think, is a step in the right direction. It's a good thing. So let's go back into the code mode here, and you can see what's been added. All right, the first thing you should get used to, and again, I'm saying this, and I should be preaching to the choir right here, saying this, and that is every time you create a new control, you should give it an ID. And really, I believe that should always be at the top. All right, so if I come in here and just type in ID and hit tab, okay, well, you can already see the IntelliSense is kicking in. You start IDs with an @ sign, a plus sign, and the word ID, and then you give it a name. So it's a Recyclerview, so I called it RV Programming. All right. That is totally something I came up with. There's nothing magical about the name. But what you should notice now is after I put this in, if I jump back to my main activity file, I had an error before, one of my many errors that was in here, but was on that RV Programming. And if you look right here, that was in red before. It no longer is in red. Okay? All right. Okay, so let's see. We'll keep the match parent. One thing I like to do is, you maybe have noticed this before, but if I go back to design mode here, you know, I literally could take this and now I've got it basically, it's buttoned up, it's right up on the edge. And there's nothing really wrong with doing that, but sometimes when you do that and you try to actually see something, you won't literally see it. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and make a couple changes, but I want to do it in code mode. All right, so I want to add some margin basically all the way around just to show you that we can do it this way, okay? So I'm going to come in here and type in margin, and you'll notice what it gives me. Left, right, bottom, end, horizontal, vertical. All right, I want start, top, end, and bottom. So okay, fine, be like that. So I'll start with left. It doesn't really matter what we start with. So I'm going to put in here 8 dp. Again, by now, you should all be comfortable with SP versus DP. That should make sense to everybody. Okay? So Android layout margin. Well, let's do another margin in here. All right, and I'll put in a margin right. And I'm going to put an 8 dp onto that as well. All right, so that's my left side and my right side. Okay. Oh, I've already got a top in here. That's why it's giving me that error. I'm going to say for the top here, I'm going to also set that to 8. All right. And again, I'm quirky this way. I've already been told that, but I like to put all my margin stuff together. You don't have to do that. Since I moved that, I got to move this. All right. And finally, I'm going to put in a margin bottom. And I'm going to make that 8 dp. Now, again, you might say, well, why didn't you just go into your design mode and just do that? And we could have. Again, some designers, some app designer developers, they know exactly what they want their screen to look like. Sizes and everything else. They've got style files. They've got theme files. They build everything from right here. They don't actually look at what their screen is going to look like until basically they've already built it. All right. Now, a couple of other things here. We're going to add some constraints over here. All right. And I'm going to put that margin start. I'll make that 8 as well. I might as well just to make sure. I'm just trying to be consistent here. So that one right there. All right. So again, putting on a couple of constraints here. So I'm literally just going to type in constraint. Well, usually it picks it up. There it is. No, it's not. Okay, fine. And everything I've done so far has been Android. Android colon, Android colon. This is app colon. All right. and I'm going to say layout constraint bottom to bottom of equal parent. Bottom to bottom of, I don't know why it's doing that, but equal parent. There we go. All right. So what is that doing? Literally, it's saying I want that to go all the way down. The parent of this is the layout itself. Does it make sense to you that this is the parent? Right here, that's the parent, and this is the child? All right. All right. I'm going to add a couple more of these. So we did the bottom to bottom. And there's end to end of. I'm going to do start to start of and top to top of. And they're all going to be parent. And that's everything for this. Now, that was a lot of work, and I'm going to do a file save all on here, but that was a lot of work just for this. Okay? And it's, like I said, there's other ways that we could have done it. I just wanted to show you a way of doing it. Now, I'm looking over here, and it looks like I've got my 8 all the way around except for my right, so I just want to quickly look and see if I put that in or not. I've got a margin right, so that should be in there. All right, so we've got that, and I'm sure we still have errors in our main activity file, and I know that because it's still red. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go in there and we're going to create another XML file right now. All right, so what I'd like you to do, especially again if you've never done this before, is in your res folder right here. All right, so in res, right mouse click on the res folder, choose new, and go to Android resource file. So right mouse click where it says res, go to new, and go to Android resource file. Okay? And it should look like this when you do this. Now, what you name this is, of course, totally up to you. All right? You can name it anything you want. Right? I'm trying to remember what I named it, but I don't know. So we'll figure it out. Sometimes they'll call it row, or something like that, because this is just a row that's in your Recyclerview. Okay? So let's see. Okay, I'm going to just call it that. I'm going to call it row. Now, when you look in here under resource types, notice there's a drop-down list. All right? And there are more things in here than are actually shown in here. For instance, I could just choose layout, but I don't want that. So I should be able to come in here and type in, okay, it doesn't like that, bless you. All right, we'll leave it like this. We'll just leave it set. It's the root element right here. This is the one. Notice it's automatically a constraint layout because everything defaults to constraint. So this third one here, I'm going to start typing in linear, and you'll notice as soon as I do, linear layout is one of the options. All right, so I'm going to choose that one. So this is what I have in here, and I realize it's kind of hard for you to see back there. I named the file name row, so it's going to make a row.xml file. All right? It's a layout. It'll be a linear layout, and this is basically just where it's going to live, and this is the directory in which it lives. Okay? So click OK, and now we've got this. All right? And again, it's up to us. We can build this in a lot of different ways. All right? But I'm going to go back into code mode again. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change this, and I'm going to make this a relative layout. And you can see this time when I did change the one on top to relative, the one on the bottom changed too. All right? The other thing that you typically do in here, you don't have to, but what you typically do in here is you give this an ID. All right? Because this is something different that we're working with, this layout. Okay? I'm just going to leave it the way it is because I'm looking in here and I don't see that I've given it one, but normally you do. All right. Notice that by default it's set to vertical. I'm going to just change that to horizontal. So I'm going to change the orientation from vertical to horizontal. The height is going to be wrap content. This is a really big thing. I was going to show you this by not having you change it. Maybe you noticed this, maybe you didn't when you were working on if you worked on the one that was assigned. And that is, if you don't change this, so if I do not change this from match parent to wrap content, I've got like 15 things in there, right? 15 images. Each one is going to have their own page. You see what I'm saying? Because you're telling it to fill up that whole screen. But when we come in here and we say wrap content, which is what we want, then we're telling it to only use what it needs. All right?
Before we get any far, I was a little behind when we were making the new resource file. What exactly were the parameters we're entering in?
All right, so we right mouse clicked on here, chose
Yeah.
new, layout resource file, call this row,
Yep.
went down to the root element here and just typed in here LIN for linear layout, chose linear layout,
Okay.
and then just click OK. All right. So this is going to be pretty simple because what do we have? Well, we're going to want two things in here, for lack of better words. If you look up on the screen here, if I go back to our main activity that's here, I'm still not sure why I'm getting that error, but we got to figure out what it is. This right here, that's going to be our image. All right, it's telling it, remember r.drawable is saying in the layout folder under drawable. Remember that everything that you put in here under layout and your res, I guess really res drawable, you cannot have uppercase in here. You may have noticed that I put JavaScript in by default because I'm just so used to putting the J and the S in uppercase, it gave me errors. You cannot save files in here, JPEGs or PNGs, in with any caseness. It's all got to be in lowercase. The other thing I find interesting about this is the support right now that I have found for using WebP files it's not as strong as I thought it would be, considering Google owns Android and Google owns WebP. I thought it would have been better, and I thought that they would have wanted that to be the default for everything. All right? But really, it's ping typically are the ones that seem to work better. All right? Okay. So jumping back again to my row.xml file, the first thing we're going to add is an image view. All right? And yeah, before we even do the width and before we do the height, we're going to give these both sizes, so don't worry about it. I mean, this can say anything. This is going to change in just a minute. But again, I like to give it an ID first of all. So I'm going to type in ID, hit tab again. And I call this IV program. IV for image view. All right, it's going to be, the program wasn't a great name, but it's the computer program kind of that we're using. All right, the The width and the height are both 225 pixels. Why? Because that's the size of the images. They're 225 by 225. And you'll notice in here when I use that, I didn't use DP and I didn't use SP. You can use pixels. You can use points, etc. Most of the regular units of measure that you have, you're able to use if you want to or need to do that. All right. And I added a little bit of left margin in here, 10 dp. So margin top. Of 10 dp. This is just a spatial thing right here. So margin bottom of 10 dp. And then finally we have to let it know what it is we're trying to see. So that's our Android source. All right. And I just picked one, picked the color in here. So I said color. Of course, you got to put that in double quotes. And here's your list. Okay? So the stuff is all in here. You can whip your way through here and pick out something different if you don't like what I used. I used design default color background. Why? Because it was near the top, and I guess I missed the card view one, so I just grabbed that one. Okay? And it really doesn't matter what you put in there. All right, so that's the image view. All right, and then we're going to put in a text view. So the image view is going to be our picture, and the text view, if you look up on the screen here, the text view is going to be this. The stuff that's in here, basically. All right? Okay. And I think I've just figured out why that data didn't work. And we're going to, again, we got one more file we got to put in here. So, all right, so our row.xml. So I'm going to come in here, and again, first thing to do, give it an ID. All right? So I always start my text views with TV, but this is going to be the description, so I called it TV description. Again, you don't like that, call it whatever you want. 250 dp and 55 dp. This is just, again, a size spacing kind of thing. So margin left. And that was 15 dp. So margin right. And that's 35 dp. Here we want to make sure that, so I did an Android layout to right of what? Ampersand ID plus, ampersand ID slash, and IV program. So in other words, we want it to be to the right. We want it to be to the right of, all right, our image view. Does that make sense? So we'll have the image view, and then to the right of that, I guess that way for you guys, will be the text view. All right. Now, we don't have to really put anything in here, but I did put some text just so we could see it. And I just put sample. All right. You can put anything you want in there. It really and truly does not matter. And then finally, the text size, I set to 30 SP. And that is it for that. All right? So you can take a quick look at that, but I'm going to just for a second bounce back to design view and then come back again. So that's what we made. All right? And if you take your mouse and you put it over here, you can see where the image view is going to be. See that? Okay? All right. And I'll come back into the code, so if you do need that, you can grab that. All right. And I hope I printed that copy out of the other one. Let's see. There it is. All right, now we're going to get rid of all those errors that we've got. In about 5 minutes, every one of those errors that you see in here, I guarantee you, they will all be gone. All right. The reason for this is it's looking for data, and we don't have a data class. This is our, this is where we have defined our data. So if you look up on the screen here, I want you please to right mouse click again where it says Java EDU. Whenever you do this one, don't ever use the test ones. Use the first one all the time. So right mouse click on here, new Java class, and we're simply going to call it data. All right. Now we're going to put stuff in there, but we're just calling it data. Why? This is the way where we're defining what we're going to be doing with our data. Okay? We want this to be able to be used all over the place. So even though you normally don't do this, we're going to say public string name public int image ID. All right, please do that, and then the rest of it we're going to get done for us almost. Everybody has that?
Where are we putting this?
This is a brand new, so you right mouse clicked on here and you chose new Java class and you called it data with a capital D. All right, what we're going to do next, you've all done this. Look up on the screen. Right mouse click on here, choose generate, choose getter and setter, and choose both fields. And OK. Now you've got a get name, you've got a set name, you've got a get image ID, and you've got a set image ID. All right? So let me double check here, make sure I didn't screw up anything. Straight name, image ID, data. Oh, and we forgot to do one other thing. Okay? Sorry. Come up to the top here. Remember, there's one other thing we can generate. Actually, there's two other things. We didn't make a constructor. So let's generate a constructor. Yes, we want to bring both of those in. Click OK, and there's that. So that is the entire class, except I'll make it a little smaller. Try to. It's not letting me use the flywheel on here. But that's basically everything that you need in here. It's got two components. The image ID, which is basically what we call those things, and the name that we're using. All right? Does everybody have that? All right, I'm going to do a file, save all, and I'm going to jump back into my main activity. All right? And lo and behold, look at all that stuff that went away. Now, there's still a problem with the adapter because we haven't written that one yet. So we're going to have to write one more class, and we'll do that in just a moment. But does everybody understand? When you're doing this, there's a lot of different orders in which you can do things. And that's what I want you to understand, all right? And sometimes you're going to get a boatload of errors in a file because you're going to be referencing things in a file you have not yet created. Does that make sense to everybody? All right? And like I said, as far as I'm concerned at least, don't let that bother you. All right? Okay, so we've got one more file that we've got to create here. And it's not real long, luckily. Actually, I think there's two more we have to create, but they're both short. Find out. So this thing right here does not exist. Recyclerview _adapter. We're going to create it right now. All right, so again, go back up to here where we just created this right here. So on your edu dot, yours is different, of course, org dot inside rankin dot whatever. All right, right mouse click, choose new, Java class, and call this Recyclerview with a big R, with a big V, _ adapter with a big A. And if you say I can't read that, as soon as I hit enter here, there. All right. And for lack of better words, this is kind of either, depending on your point of view, where the fun begins, or it's like this is really a pain in the butt. All right? Because we're going to start putting our stuff in here now. And I'm looking at this, and I'm pretty sure I did forget to print out one file. So I'm going to have to go and steal it from the working copy that I've got. Totally fine. All right. So we're going to come in here, and it's public class Recyclerview adapter. We're going to start putting in more code now. When we do, it's going to generate other errors. All right. They'll all be fixed shortly. All right. So whenever you create an adapter, it has to extend. You know what extends means. All right. So in other words, Recyclerview adapter is a child. It's a child of what? It's a child of Recyclerview dot adapter. All right. Now, as soon as we do that, it's coming up with another error. Now, if you look up on the screen, please, for a second, probably I shouldn't have called this. Maybe I should have just called this recycle adapter or something, because this is very similar to this. I wasn't really paying that much attention when I was keying it in. All right. Now, like I said, this is in red. Why? Because it's expecting more information. All right. Now it needs to know that we are using a view holder. And guess what? Now it's giving us even more errors. All right. Now you'll notice that with view holder here, if I take my mouse and put it here, put it over this, it says cannot resolve symbol view holder. Create type parameter view holder. Well, we could do that if we wanted to. We're not going to do it like that. All I'm going to tell you is, again, as we work through this, like I showed you, we're down to one or two errors in here, and they're both because of the class we're now in. All the rest of the stuff is now fixed. All right? So if you just bear with me for a couple minutes, everything should work its way out. All right. So the first thing we want to do, and you may or may not remember this from before, is we have to bring in our data set. So I'm just going to put a comment there and say bring in data set. And again, all data set is, all that is what do we want to display? That's it. So I'm going to come in here and say list data list equal collections dot empty list. And if you don't get what that means, and we're going to fix both those errors in just a second, that's just saying we're starting with an empty list. So we haven't brought the information in yet. Now if I take my mouse and put it over the word list, right mouse click and show content actions, it imports the class. And the same thing with collections. Show content action, import class. I could have manually, that's why I had you do the last one that way. We could have manually typed those in, or we could let the system find them for us. All right? So we had 4 errors, we're down to 2. And that's a start. Now, I've got a list of articles that I want to send you, and one of them is basically it's a 5-page article on what the hell does context mean. Context in here, for lack of better words, is if you remember in the AWD1112 class, when we wanted to refer to the existence of something and where it currently was, we used this. All right? Context basically is almost the same thing. Good, bad, or indifferent, there's a lot of ways that you can express context. All right? But some of the things that we use in here need the word context. So you come in here and we say context. And as again, notice when I come in here, you oftentimes call it the same thing, but with lowercase. All right? And again, if I take my mouse and put it on here and do my Alt-Enter, and I can import the class. And now it brought in and import Android content context. All right? So we were up to 5 errors, then we went to 2 errors, or 4 errors, then to 2, then we went back up to 3, and now we're back to 2 again. All right? All right. So the first thing I want to do, and again, I think we probably could come in here and right mouse click and choose generate. I don't like to do that when I'm working with Recyclerviews. Recyclerviews, from everything I've worked with in this language, are the easiest thing to screw up. Again, that's my opinion, for whatever that is or is not worth. All right? So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to write a constructor. So public Recyclerview underscore adapter. Okay? And it's going to require our list of data that we are calling data. And it's going to require the application, which is application. And you'll notice again, we get an error. If I take my mouse and put it over here and do my show content actions, import class. And it brought in import android.app.application. All right? So what we want to do in here, I don't know why I put that in because I don't have any comment in there, but I put in, there's just literally 2 lines of code here. This dot list equals data, and this dot context equals application. And if you go, okay, that's fine, what does that mean? You have to read the documentation. I can't give you a good explanation of what that means. All right. It's funny. I've been watching this this series on React that I went and bought a few months ago, and I just started watching it again. And the guy will oftentimes say, "Well, there's really no explanation for that. It's boilerplate code, and you got to put it in. So, like it or not, you have no choice." That's kind of what I tell you for this. All right. So, if I take my mouse, let's see. If I come back up to the top here, see where this is all underlined? Yours probably is too. If you right mouse click on it and choose Show Context Actions, the first one will be Implement Methods. And that's going to be our onCreate, our onBind, and our count, basically. So I'm going to tell it to implement all 3 of those. Yeah, you want all 3. If you don't choose all 3, you're going to get an error because it'll tell you that it's missing. So there's the 3. Now, it's generating other errors because we haven't created view holder yet. All right, we're going to do that a little bit differently. And I'm going to have to, like I said, dig it out because I stupidly didn't print out a copy of that. I'll look through here again, but I don't think I did. All right, the easiest one to do is this one. It usually is just a couple lines long. So I'm going to say return list.size. That's it. So the count is going to be the number of elements that we have in our data list. Everybody hear that? Usually it's going to either be a size or a length or a count or something like that. All right. Now, sometimes what you'll see in here, just so you know, is there'll be an if statement in there that'll say if it's not null. All right. Because you don't want to return null right here. It's not, and it won't be. But it is possible that it could be in certain situations. All right. If you had, for some reason, if you didn't set up your data yet and it was still empty, you wouldn't want to return null. Why? Because it crashed the program. All right. All right. So the ones we do next here aren't going to really matter. So let's just go up to the top and do the onCreate. And you'll notice it's got return null here. In other words, this has got to return something. Does that make sense to everybody? Right now it's null, but it has to return something. So I'm going to put that one down at the bottom. It won't be null in just a second. All right. So the first thing I want to do is, again, what's called inflate the layout and initialize the view holder. All right. I'm giving you a little bit of documentation, not a whole heck of a lot. All right. And like I said, we're starting slow with this. And it may or may not seem like it, but we're actually doing a project that's fairly simple. The next one that we do is going to be harder. All right? We're going to walk through it as a class. And we're going to implement some stuff in there, such as we're going to you'll learn how to put in menus. All right? And we'll bring in some other stuff that we've been talking about. Then, actually getting all this stuff done, getting this done, getting the assignment that was done that I gave you from the Code Lab, and one more thing that we'll be working on, that's going to be your homework for Unit 4. All right, we'll talk about what you're going to do for a test. We'll talk about that at the end of the week. All right, so I'm going to come in here, and like I said, we're going to inflate the layout. So view V equal, and this is long, so I'm going to put it over 2 lines. Did you hear me? You don't have to do that, but you can do that. All right, so I'm going to say layout inflator dot from, and again, this is where I'm going to put it on another line. Okay? Parent, false. Okay, I don't know where that parenthesis came from. I have absolutely no idea. And I get a bunch of errors in here, so we're going to fix those next. So return holder. All right, so the reason I'm getting this, if I put my mouse over it and show context actions, it'll say you don't have a class name view holder. We're going to make that next. All right? All right, but if we come in here and if I put my mouse over here, it says, oh, if you do an Alt-Enter, you can import the view class. We want that, so now that's in there. So that got fixed. If we do this, and again show content actions, and import the class. Now we've got that fixed. So the errors that we still have in here are because we're using view holder, which we have not created yet. Did you all hear me? Now, we're going to do the onbind view holder next, but before we do, because there's only 3 or 4 lines of code we have to put in. You've got your choice when you create the view holder class. The example that I showed you earlier, in there earlier, if you remember, all right, that's where I showed you the class within the class. We're going to make an external class just because you can do it that way. And I wanted to show you both ways. All right? So, come down to here to your onbind view holder, rather. And I'll put in a comment, and I think there's only like 2 lines of code we have to put in here. So use the provide Now, it's giving us the errors that we still have because this holder is part of view holder. Do you understand what I'm saying? All right. So if you look up on the screen right now, you'll notice no more errors in our main activity file. So if I go back to this is now clean. See that? We had the error here on our adapter stuff. Since we added the adapter, those are all gone. All right? But when you come back in here, we've still got these errors. I'm going to make sure that you've got all this stuff. So I'm going to leave that for a moment. And we have to add the view holder class, which is not a big class. Let me see if I did remember to print it out. I probably forgot. I do have it. Hot doggy. It literally is about 5 lines. Hopefully then we're going to be able to run it and it'll be done. So, I'd like you to please, if you haven't done so in a while, do a file save all. And then, as we've been doing, right mouse click on here, choose new Java class, and again we're going to call this view underscore holder. Alright, which gives you this, and literally there's about 5 or 6 lines we have to put in, and that should be it. So, first thing we want to do is we want to go text view, TV description, gotta spell it right, and image view, IV program. Now I'm getting those errors because again I've got to right mouse click on the word text view, choose show content actions and import the class, and do the same thing here for the image view. So you need these 2 lines. That's why we have those errors. Okay? Now we have to put in a constructor, and the constructor's literally got 4 or 5 lines, and then we should be finished. So public, not pubic, that would not be nice. So public view underscore, whoops, gotta spell it right, view underscore holder, like that, view, item view, super, item view, and then TV description equals item view dot find view by ID r.id.tv description and IV program. Now I'm getting these errors right here, the find view by ID. If I right mouse click on here, look on the screen please, if I right mouse click on the word view, show content actions and import class, all right, that fixed that error. I don't know why the super is giving me an error, but we'll see if we can fix that in a second. So this one, oops, and this will be dot IV program. All right, so it's still giving me some errors. So let's see if I look on my code here because I didn't think anything was wrong. View item view, super item view. Well, that needs an equal sign. That would sure help. Public view holder, view, item view, super item view, because that is correct. TV description and IV program. Not sure what the problem is right there. It says object in Java laying object cannot be applied to Android view.view. Well, let me take a quick look here when I far as I know, this is correct. I have one more import statement, but I don't think we need it, but maybe let's see if that gets rid of the error. It did not, and it's gray, which means I'm not using it. I didn't think I needed that. I left it in here, but I didn't think I needed it. Class. Oh, there's the problem. Okay. Okay, this has got to extends Recyclerview dot view holder. There we go. There's everything. Now, you're all trusting. I appreciate that. I'm going to save this, and I'll come right back to it. But I want to see if it works. Still building. Wow. It gave me an error here. So, and look at this. It gave me an error because I forgot to put a semicolon right there. See that? The whole thing blew up because I forgot to put in a semicolon. That was on me. Well, lo and behold, there we go. All right. So let me remove that and get back to this. So if any of you still need this code, you can have it. There's the stuff for view holder. In my humble opinion, this is one of those things that unless you do this again and again and again, it's not going to make a lot of sense. And even then, it's not going to make a lot of sense. All right? I think I've told you about my foibles. I'm up to 2 days a week now that I'm doing my guitar practice. He'd like to have me there every day because he said I'm finally starting to where I'm making some progress. He said there have been 2 or 3 times he was going to, the way he put it, I was going to dump you. All right? It's because I just wasn't getting any better. But it's the same kind of thing here. The only way you get better at creating recycler views is to create a lot of recycler views. All right? Let's go back and take a quick look at this. I think that's going to actually then be enough for today. All right, because this was a lot to throw at you in one period. So let's just take it back from the top. Now, in our activity main, the only thing we put in there was the recycler view. Now, again, we did that from code mode, so to speak. But we could have just dragged it in here and done it like that too, right? Okay, so that's it. That's all that's in here is the recycler view. Okay? So, nothing much more to say about that. Then we had this, which is what we wanted to put in each row. And I just called it row. Sometimes you'll see it called row layout or whatever. A lot of people will append an underscore layout on the end. And again, this is another thing, lowercase. And if you're going to append 2 words together, use an underscore. I don't think it'll take a dash. All right, if there's one thing that I'd say about this language, it's real hinky as far as certain things. It expects it to be in certain ways, and if you don't do that, it just won't take it. All right, so we came in here. And I mentioned this, we didn't need to do it in here, but quite often what you're going to end up doing is you're going to take the layout that you create for your row layout and you're going to give it an ID. All right? We didn't have to here. We're not doing a whole heck of a lot with this, to be honest with you. We will on the next project that we do. Then we came in and we did the image views. Again, this is our image, 225 by 225. We put a little bit of margin all the way around it, just to separate it, and, again, play with the color any way you want to. And then here was the text view. Again, 250 by 55, okay? And we made the text size a little bigger. Hopefully, by now, you can look at everything that's in those XML files and it makes sense to you, all right? And one of the reasons I went back in and did it that way and put like the constraints and stuff in there is because there's a lot of stuff that we just don't even talk about in here, because normally you don't want to dink with it, but you can. And a lot of it depends on, your level of sophistication, your level of comfort, your level of experience. All right. So in our main, again, I'm not worried about the imports. Let's just look at it from the top. So we came in here and we did what? Okay. In our onCreate, we added this. This was telling us that we had a class or something someplace in this program that had to be defined that was called data. Why? Because we're making a list of that stuff. And if you remember, in our data class, which we'll bring up in a minute, we had just the name and the image ID, right? That's all we had in there. All right? And then this actually, as it says, filled our data. So when we look at data right here, data was expecting what? A string for the name and an image ID, which is an int. Well, when we go back and we look at this, it actually looks a little weird in that there's the name and there's the image ID. You're like, well, there's no number there. That's how, basically, it's like an array, for lack of better words. The way that it's set up, I don't know if that makes sense or it doesn't make sense. All right. But this is what it's calling a name, and that's the ID. So that is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 15 or whatever there is. Okay? All right. So then we created our Recyclerview, and basically up here, usually in the past, I've done this as 2 lines. There's so little code in here that I didn't, but normally I would have done it like this. I would have come in there and done this. If you look up on the screen here, you don't have to do this. I'm just going to remove it right away. But normally, I would come in here and do this. Recyclerview, up here, and then in here, where we've got it, I wouldn't need to redeclare it. See that? Everybody see what I just did? All right. Because that's, the way that and much of the stuff that I was taught on this, nobody taught me. It was watching videos, it was taking online classes, but I was never in a classroom situation, let's put it that way. All right? But a lot of them show it this way, where they say, hey, this is making those global, and now really they're not global anymore. So this is where you should define your variables, this is where you should initialize your variables. So in the same way, we could have done this. I think this will work without any problem. If I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. Now, like I said, that's how I was taught to do this stuff. All right? I don't think it really seems to matter much which way you do it. Okay? You'll see it done both ways. All right. So here we are, again, we are getting the reference to what's in our XML file, okay? And here is where we are creating, basically we're calling the adapter. And notice what we're passing into that, data and get application. You see that? Data and get application. So we jump over to our Recyclerview adapter and we look then, we go in and we look at what? We come in and we look at our constructor. And notice what it tells us. List data, all right, and application. Remember that these right here, we've talked about this many times, these are called actual parameters, okay? These over here are called formal parameters, and they typically don't have to be the same name, but there's nothing at all wrong with making them the same name either. All right, if I was going to call this from all over the place and pass it different stuff, then I might consider naming it something different. All right. Then we set our adapter, and we set our layout manager. All right, the fill thing we've already talked about. I don't think there's anything more to really say about that. All right, so we go over to our Recyclerview adapter. And again, what I'm telling you is this file that you see right here, this view holder file, we could have taken that file, all of this code that you see right here, and I could have put it inside of our Recyclerview adapter file. In fact, you see that more often than you see it the way I did it. So why am I showing it to you that way? Because it can be done both ways, and that's why I wanted to show you that it can be done both ways. All right, so we go back to our adapter then. Here's the data that we're working with. This is our context, and we need context for some of the stuff that we use later. That's why we've got it here. All right, again, here's our constructor, and here are the three methods we need. So this is creating the view holder, this is binding the view holder to the view, and this is getting a count of how many things we want. In order to be able to do that, again, all right, we say here, this extends Recyclerview adapter, and this thing right here, this view holder that you see on the screen right now in blue, that's got to be, whatever name we give that has got to be what we name this. There's nothing magical about the name view_holder. All right, we could have called it something else. And what is this doing? Well, basically, this is saying, hey, item view. Now, this isn't r.id, but we have never used item view before. All right, why? Because these are the individual items that are making up the ones that are in our row.xml file. Remember, there's two things in there. All right, there was an image view, and there was a text view. So this is, basically doing the linkage or whatever you want to call it between those and the actually what's in the XML file. All right, so hopefully that helped, and even if it doesn't make a lot of sense, it's making a little bit of sense. All right, and it's 2:15, so I'm just going to stop it right here, and then tomorrow we're going to start building one from scratch that's going to be a little bit more complex. And just so you know, the other thing that I sent you in here, so the stuff I sent you today, you had the images that we just used, you've got the intro to Recyclerview, all right, which I went over with that PowerPoint, and the other thing is this, and this, if I make this nice and small, come on, no, I don't want to do that. If I make this nice and small, that's our data that we're going to use. So that's all 46 presidents, 0 to 45. Each president then will have an ID. All right. Why? Because we want to be able to, we're going to have all 46 of them will be basically in our Recyclerview, but when you click on one, we want the ability to change what's in there. So let's suppose I spelled George wrong, as an example. So I want to be able to click on the George Washington on that particular row, and I want it to bring up the information about George Washington. Does that make sense? We're not going to put much information in here. All right. First name, and actually, a first name and a last name. All right. The time that they served, and then a picture of them. So not really a whole heck of a lot of stuff. All right. So we're going to pick it up there, like I said, tomorrow. All right. And the rest of the period then today will be lab. Now I'm writing the test for the other class, and if I do get done with it, I'm gonna try to do some grading. I'm sorry I've gotten so far behind. No, when I gave this lecture a year ago, there were two people in the class only. It was Keegan and Angie. And when it was over, I asked them both individually,
I said, Angie, does this make sense? And she goes, well, sort of. She said, at least I kind of understand what you're trying to do. And then I asked Keegan later, I said, Keegan, does this make sense? He said, not at all. He said, not really. Anything you said made sense. But he got